Hey guys and gals, just wanted to chat with you real quick about my Spirit Proton pack that I'm making for my son. So there's a couple things I want to go over. First of all is the primer that I'm using for this and few modifications that I've done to it to really make it look a lot better. So one of the first things I did is I added some fake weld lines here. Just used a bit of hot glue from a hot glue gun. Went slow, make small little dabs, and kind of just keep going. Now, if you don't like it, the nice thing is they just peel right off. Let it cool down a little bit so it gets semi-firm, and then you get underneath it and you'll be able to pop them right off without too much trouble. I think it adds a lot to the look and really changes it for the better. So one of the other things I did is I covered up the speaker holes here in the front of the cyclotron, and you can almost just see some of the holes still. So I might go through and sand it over again. You can't really feel them, but you can kind of see it a little bit. The best thing I can suggest to do this is patience. I use Bondo, and I use a filler primer, which I'll be talking about soon. And the best thing to do is really just go slow. Let it sit, let it dry, come back to it whenever the time says, whether that's 4 or 6 hours later, 24 hours later, and try it again, and sand it, and go over it again. And you're going to get your best results with patience. You know, I've been working on this on and off. I'm not in a huge rush to get it done, but, you know, I will say that I've probably put about 10 to a dozen layers on it. Layer of Bondo, sand it down, layer of primer, sand it down, maybe a little more Bondo, just keep going over it. Sand it down, sand it smooth, sand it with a sanding sponge. That helps a lot because it keeps you from pressing down and having a hard spot with your finger or a low spot with your finger. The sanding sponge really keeps it level. And one of the last things I did here is I'm going to be adding a movable crank knob on top, which I've never done before. So what I did is I cut the old one off with a Dremel, which is one of my favorite shop tools. And then I put a piece of wood behind it to hold the Bondo in place. I hot glued that in place. And then same thing, I Bondoed it and I just layered the Bondo on until it was semi-flush, and then alternated Bondo and filler primer until it got fairly level. It's not perfect, but I think for my purposes for this project, it looks pretty good. And this is the pack overall. I think it's looking pretty nice. I'm going to sand it down with a very fine grit sandpaper, maybe 500. We'll see. I want it nice and smooth. There's some rough spots over here on the side of the cyclotron that are a little rough. So I want to smooth those out. And you get better results when you take your time and you put the work into it. If you do the work before you paint, your paint's going to look better. Now, speaking of paint, what am I using here? Well, I'm using this Rust-Oleum Filler 2-in-1 Filler Sanding Primer. This can be found at Walmart. It's about $5.50 a can, which isn't too bad. It goes a long way, and it really does help. You do a couple light coats, you let it dry, you do another couple light coats, and this is an example. This 3D printed part I did on my 3D printer. You can see all the lines here on the inside, and what I did, I just sanded it with a couple different layers of sandpaper, starting at 60 and working my way up to 320, and then I primed it with the filler sandable primer and sanded it and kept going over. And this is about 5 coats, and I have to say it's relatively smooth. I might go over it one more time, maybe not, we'll see. Probably one more time. And I want to get it as smooth as I can. It's a little bit extra work, but I will say that in the end it will look better. So that's what I'm using. The Bondo, as far as the Bondo I use this Bondo glazing spot putty, and it's really just like a red paste. It's pretty thick, and you layer it on, you spread it out with your hands, with your finger, with a putty knife, whatever you have. You want it thin. If it's too thick, it's going to crack. and you don't want it to crack because that's more work. So you put it on thin, you layer it on thin, you let it dry, you come back, you do another layer thin. And that really helps build it up. It makes a big difference. And then once that's kind of built up, sand it down, layer it again, sand it down. When you got it the way you want it, then you start using your primer. And the primer is going to go in, is going to do an even finer job of filling in those spots, showing you what has to be sanded better. I had a spot over here, and you still kind of just see it. It's a little wavy through here still. And the Bondo is a little high, a little rough, and the primer shows you that. So then I can sand it down, prime it again, sand it down, prime it again until it's really smooth. And that's the nice part about the filler primer, is that it does fill in some of those low spots, fill in any wrinkles. If you do it right and if you're patient, you can get a really good result. Anyways, I hope that helped anyone. If anyone has any questions, leave a comment. I check it pretty regularly. I would love to help anyone out. I know when I started this, I asked a ton of questions. I still ask a ton of questions because there's never a stupid question, except for that one. But we're not going to talk about that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.